Hey guys, in today's video, I picked up this 2000 Yamaha 25 two-stroke outboard. This motor was sitting in this guy's garage for about 2 years, and he told me it will only run if he kept the choke on. So I'm sure it's got some carb issues. You can see here the serial number for this model. But it is a relatively clean motor. It's not too bad. It's really dirty, of course, in the lower units right here. But if you guys have been enjoying the videos, please smash the like button down below and subscribe. And let's break this down and get this 25 Yamaha running again. Next thing we're going to do is install a compression gauge and do a compression reading. And what this is going to tell us is how healthy the power head is. I only got a reading of 100 pounds, which is pretty low for this engine. So we can see what the bottom one looks like. Now again, I got a pretty low reading. I got about 90 pounds in this cylinder, which is pretty bad. So what we're going to do is check it with the borescope then. But before we do that, we're going to just check spark and see if this engine has good spark. And this engine had a good solid spark between both cylinders. So what I'm going to do now is go into the cylinders with my borescope camera. This is going to tell me how healthy the power head really is internally, just because the compression readings were pretty low. So I'm just going to investigate in here and see what's going on. After investigating with my camera, there's a couple of spots I saw in here where there's a good amount of scoring. You see here a decent amount of scoring right there. And again, what you want to see in the cylinders is good hatching against the walls. This engine cylinder is starting to lose a lot of that. You can see a lot of rust and corrosion starting to get in there. You can see where the rings are starting to stick a little bit. It could, this stuff happens from just old age and just not properly oiling it correctly and stuff like that. But these Yamahas are pretty much bulletproof, so it doesn't scare me too bad. But we can do the same thing with the bottom cylinder because the bottom cylinder was lower than the top cylinder. Same thing, just getting the bottom cylinder to bottom dead center just so I can see the whole cylinder. And what I saw in this bottom cylinder is kind of the last thing I want to see. You can see here is a significant amount of scoring going on in the cylinders. There's a lot of it going on. This is most likely due to the piston ring sticking to the walls and just old age. I mean, this is over a 20-year-old motor. You can see right here where the ring was really sticking, that deep mark. So this can allow compression to leak down, and you won't get proper compression in the cylinder, and you won't get the proper combustion in the cylinder. And your engine will never run correctly. But these Yamahas are pretty bulletproof, so we're going to still try and get this thing running. These motors are notorious to just keep running, so I'm going to try to get her running still, and if we can get her running, then it just kind of proves the point that these Yamahas are pretty bulletproof regardless of what's going on with them internally. So just something cool to look at if you have the camera. It really helps diagnose a lot of stuff. I mean, you just see here there's a lot of scoring going on. That cylinder wall is not supposed to be straight line like that. It should be hatch marks, so that's why the compression was so low. But we'll see if we can get it running, and we'll see what we can do with this. What I'm going to do now is pull the carbs off and do deep cleaning on them. But first thing we're going to do is pull off this air box to get to the carbs. Now that we got the carbs off of the engine, what we got to do is disconnect them into individual carbs. So we just got to disconnect them from the choke linkage and the throttle linkage, which are these two levers on each side, and then the fuel line that connects the two carbs together. Then I'll tear each carb down individually and rebuild them with a carb kit and a cleaning. So let's get right to it and get these carbs rebuilt. The bottom of this bowl, it was filled with a bunch of dirt and gunk you see here that will clog up jets, and this is probably the main running issue with this motor. Even the emulsification tube had a lot of the jets clogged, so it's a good thing we're cleaning this. What I like to typically do is screw in the idle mixture screw until it lightly seats. This tells me how many turns the idle mixture was at before I took the carb apart. So for this carb, it was at 3.5 revolutions from a seated position. So again, all you do is screw in the screw until you lightly seat it. That tells you how many times the screw needs to be turned out when you go to reassemble it. Now that being said, someone could have messed with the carb and it could be adjusted wrong, so just keep that in mind. This guy had it at 3.5 turns, which seems a little rich, but we'll see what it looks like once we actually get it up and running. Now you can see with this jet that it's completely clogged. This one's all cleared out, but this one you cannot see through, meaning that no gas can get through this jet. Here you can see the difference between the old carburetor and the carb that I just threw in the ultrasonic cleaner. You can see the colors came right back and it's all pretty clean, and the aluminum's pretty shiny. So the ultrasonic cleaner helps out a lot. And here's the difference between the top halves of the carb. So if you guys are rebuilding carbs and doing this a lot, I'd highly recommend getting yourself an ultrasonic cleaner because it makes these carbs look absolutely brand new. So now that both carbs are clean, what we're going to do is rebuild them. I'm just going to rebuild the bottom carb just because that has the fuel pump on it. And then I'm not going to show you guys the second one because it's the exact same process. If you have any questions, just drop it down in the comments. And any parts I'll use, I'll have it down in the description. All we have to do now is install the carbs back onto the engine. Now this engine is a little bit more difficult. I found the best way is to do this way by just dropping the carbs in like this. If you guys have any other better ways, please drop it down in the comments and let me know. next thing we're going to do is drop the lower unit and do a water pump change. So you can see here there is a coupler nut and a jam nut, and what you want to do is have this engine in reverse, because in forward and in neutral the nuts are not exposed. And all you have to do then is drop the 2 bolts on each side, so 4 in total, and the lower unit will drop. So let's drop the lower unit and do a water pump change on this. Now my engine was also using salt water before I had this, and you can see here I am not able to turn the jam nut, so what I had to resort to is torching it up to break it loose, because there's too much corrosion and won't allow the threads to unthread. Eventually I was able to get it off. You can see here the shift linkage will disconnect then, so you can see here in neutral and forward the shift linkage is disconnected. And once again, we have another stuck bolt. You can see even with the brake breaker bar, it wouldn't break loose. So I had to bring out the torch and torch up the bolt because there's too much corrosion on the threads. And just like that, the lower unit dropped. So what we're going to do is get it up on the stand and do a water pump change on this lower unit. Once you got everything adjusted, you can then test out the shifting. So right now I am in neutral. You can see the prop shaft spins correctly. And then you lock into forward and lock just one way. And then back into neutral. And at the same time as spinning the prop, you can shift it into reverse. And you can see here, it locks into reverse nice and good. So that's how you do the water pump on these Yamahas. Now what we're going to do is fire up the engine and see what this thing can do. So when I went to go check the spark plug booties to see if it was actually firing, I saw here that I never actually tightened the spark plugs back up. So I'm just going to throw brand new spark plugs in this because these are the originals and fire back up. I'm sure this is why it kept shutting off on me. So it did sound like I did hit the rev limiter a little bit on this engine, but this is most likely due to the prop because it is pretty chewed up and probably not the right pitch for my boat. But other than that, the motor ran great and I have no complaints about it. I just got done fully detailing this motor and it turned out looking really good and it runs great. That's going to be the end for this video. If you guys have been enjoying the videos, please smash the like button down below and of course subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.